King Charles is preparing for a notable slight during his upcoming royal visit to Australia, as it has been revealed that no high-ranking Australian politicians will attend his welcome event. The King, accompanied by Queen Camilla, is set to arrive in Australia on Friday, October 18th, with their official reception in Canberra scheduled for October 21st. However, the absence of state premiers is already apparent. Victoria's Premier, Jacinta Allan, and her deputy, Ben Carroll, have announced they will miss the occasion due to a cabinet meeting. While Victoria will send Parliamentary Secretary Nick Stakos and State Governor Margaret Gardner as representatives, they are not alone in the decision to shun the royal visit. Queensland's Premier Stephen Miles has opted to focus on his re-election campaign, while Tasmania's Jeremy Rockliff will be away on a trade mission in the United States. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns and South Australia's Peter Malinauskas have also cited cabinet meetings as their reason for absence, and Western Australia's Roger Cook simply mentioned other commitments. This latest snub has drawn criticism from the pro-monarchy Australian Monarchist League, whose spokesperson Bev McArthur described it as a slap in the face to the king. She expressed her disappointment to the Herald Sun, stating, "All premiers and ministers have pledged their loyalty to King Charles, and it is a grave insult to turn away from his hand, extended in friendship. This is a historic chance to unite Australia, focus on charitable endeavours, and give back to our communities, yet our immature politicians seem intent on playing political games." Opposition spokesman Brad Rosewell echoed her sentiments, urging Premier Allan not to diminish the significance of the King's visit. He remarked, "At times, true leadership requires setting aside personal biases for the greater good." In a related development, King Charles has indicated that he will not obstruct any efforts by Australia to consider replacing him as head of state. The Australian Republic Movement arm reached out to Buckingham Palace to request a meeting with the king during his landmark tour. Palace officials responded on his behalf, assuring them that their views had been duly noted. They emphasized that as a constitutional monarch, the king acts on the advice of his ministers, and the decision of whether Australia becomes a republic rests with the Australian public. Meanwhile, a statement made by King Charles 2 years ago could have significant financial and political implications for the UK, potentially costing the nation a staggering £200 billion. As the monarch embarks on an 11-day tour of Australia, there is a looming threat that Commonwealth nations, particularly those in the Caribbean, may reignite demands for reparations tied to Britain's involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. These claims could be fueled by previous comments made by Charles, which have already drawn significant attention and could bolster calls for imperative justice. King Charles's trip to Australia coincides with his attendance at a Commonwealth summit, where he will join UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. During the summit, 15 Caribbean governments led by Barbados are expected to push for discussions on slavery reparations. Barbados, which formally removed Queen Elizabeth Roman II as its head of state in 2021, is spearheading these demands, with Prime Minister Mia Mottley playing a key role. According to reports, Mottley has been particularly encouraged by comments Charles made in 2022, just before he ascended the throne. In a noteworthy speech delivered on behalf of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth Roman II, King Charles referred to the issue of slavery as a conversation whose time has come. This statement, consisting of just 6 words, has become a focal point for those advocating reparations from the UK. In the same speech, Charles expressed his deep sorrow over the atrocities of the slave trade, emphasizing that he was working to deepen his understanding of its lasting impact on societies, particularly those within the Commonwealth. King Charles's reflections on slavery have not been limited to mere expressions of regret. In April 2023, the monarch went a step further by endorsing research into his own family's historical ties to the institution of slavery. signaling his commitment to grappling with the legacy of Britain's colonial past. This willingness to confront uncomfortable truths has not gone unnoticed, and it is expected that these actions will be cited by Caribbean leaders as they seek reparations for the descendants of enslaved Africans. The issue of reparations has gained renewed momentum in recent years, especially as Republican sentiments continue to rise in the Caribbean. Several nations once under British rule are increasingly distancing themselves from the monarchy, raising the prospect of further challenges to the UK historical legacy. The push for reparations is seen as part of a broader movement to reckon with colonial injustices and the enduring socioeconomic disparities that are the direct result of slavery. For the UK, the potential financial liability is immense. The figure currently being discussed, £200 billion, is staggering, but it may only represent the beginning of what some advocates believe is truly owed. In fact, there are suggestions that the final amount could reach an astonishing £19 trillion, reflecting the enormous scale of Britain's involvement in the slave trade. It is estimated that the UK transported over 3 million Africans to the Americas during the height of the transatlantic trade. By the early 18th century, Britain had become the world's leading slaving nation. The British Empire's role in the brutal trade of enslaved Africans helped fuel its economic growth, particularly through the exploitation of colonies in the Caribbean. The profits from slavery, especially from the sugar and tobacco industries, were funneled back to Britain, enriching both private individuals and the state. This legacy has left a lasting imprint on the Caribbean, where many nations still grapple with the economic consequences of colonialism and the systemic inequalities rooted in the slave trade. Britain officially abolished the slave trade in 1807, and by 1833, the practice of slavery was outlawed in its colonies. However, the British government compensated slave owners not the formerly enslaved for the loss of their property. This compensation scheme amounted to £20 million at the time, a colossal sum equivalent to around £16 billion today. Descendants of the enslaved, meanwhile, received nothing, and the economic fallout of this decision continues to reverberate across the Caribbean. For advocates of reparations, the moral argument is clear. They believe that the UK has a responsibility to address the generational trauma and systemic disadvantages caused by slavery. The staggering wealth extracted from colonies like Barbados, Jamaica, and others helped build the foundations of modern Britain, and now there is growing pressure to make amends. Motley and other Caribbean leaders are likely to point to King Charles's remarks as an acknowledgement of this historical wrong and a step toward restitution. Yet any attempt to pursue reparations on such a massive scale is fraught with political and legal complexities. While the UK government has expressed regret over the slave trade, it has stopped short of issuing a formal apology, likely due to fears of opening the floodgates for reparative claims. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, speaking earlier this year, indicated that while he condemns the atrocities of the past, the government has no plans to engage in reparations negotiations. Still, the pressure is mounting. King Charles's stance on the issue, his acknowledgement of the suffering caused by slavery, and his support for further research into the monarchy's ties to the trade has set a precedent. It places the UK in a delicate position as it seeks to maintain strong relationships with Commonwealth nations while navigating the growing demand for reparative justice. As the King's visit to Australia unfolds, the question of slavery reparations may become one of the most significant topics in his reign thus far. The implications extend beyond financial costs to the broader question of how Britain reconciles with its colonial past and the long shadow it continues to cast over the present. Whether or not the UK will be forced to pay billions in compensation remains to be seen, but the debate is far from over. Thank you for watching until the end. Please share your thoughts in the comments section and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more updates.